Okay, so can everyone see my screen? Okay, good. So today I will be explaining about poems and the basic things about poems. So let's begin now. So first I am going to be explaining what poems are. So poems are a type of writing, and poems are a type of writing that have both the nature of a song and a speech. So this means poems are a combination of a song and a speech. And poems are sometimes rhyming. And if you write a poem that is rhyming, or if you write a poem that is not rhyming, either way is fine. So, since we know what poems are now, I will be explaining the different types of poems. And today I'll be just explaining the most common types of poems. Okay, the first one I'm going to explain is an autobiographical poem. So an autobiographical poem is a poem written by you about yourself. And it is about your life, and it does not rhyme. So it has 13 lines, and each line is about a different subject. So the next type of poem I am going to talk about is a limerick poem. A limerick poem is a 5-line poem, and it is usually funny and has humor. So here is an example of a limerick poem. This poem is called Hickory Dickory Dock, and some of you may know it. And the first line, second line, and the fifth lines rhyme. And the first, second, and fifth lines are longer than the third and fourth lines. And the third and fourth lines rhyme. So this is the structure of a limerick poem. Next, I'll be explaining a cinquain poem. A cinquain poem has 5 lines and is vivid in imagery. So vivid in imagery means that it has many details, and the details can help the reader visualize the image that the poet is trying to show. And it also creates a certain tone for the reader. So this means that it can help the reader feel what the poet is trying to feel. And it does not rhyme. So let's move on. So the next type of poem I am going to explain is a Diamante poem. A Diamante poem is a poem shaped like a diamond, so that is how it gets its name, a Diamante poem. And each line uses a specific type of word. And it has 7 lines in total. So here's an example if you want to see it. And it serves 2 different purposes. The first purpose is to compare, and the second purpose is to contrast. And contrast means to find different things about 2 things. For instance, winter and summer. 2 different things about winter and summer is frosty and sunny, since winter is frosty, while summer is sunny. And it has many synonyms and antonyms. And synonyms are words that are different and mean the same thing. And antonyms are words that are the same, that are different and mean the opposite. So I see someone joined. Hi. So we started, and so right now we're talking about the different types of poems. So yeah. Okay. So next I'll be explaining what a haiku poem is. A haiku poem is a Japanese type of poetry, and it is usually about nature, although you can write it about other things also. And a haiku poem has 3 lines, and the first line has 5 syllables. So, in this haiku poem example, the first line is butterflies are cool. It has 5 syllables. Butterflies are cool, 5 syllables. And the second line has 7 syllables. In the big, huge green forest, 7 syllables. And the third line has 5 syllables also, just like the first line. They fly up so high. So next, I'll be explaining what a tanka poem is. A tanka is a 5-line poem, and it is usually also about nature. So it's kind of like a haiku poem. And tanka means short song. And the first and third lines have 5 syllables. And the second, fourth, and fifth lines have 7 syllables. So, hello, Grace. We are talking about the different types of poems right now. So next, I'll be explaining what an acrostic poem is. An acrostic poem is a pretty fun poem to write, and the first letter of each sentence spells out a word, and each line starts with a letter from the word. So this is kind of hard to visualize. So I have a picture right here. So this is an acrostic poem. And if you look at the green words green letters over here, it spells out Christmas. And an acrostic poem works like this. So the first line of this example of an acrostic poem is Carl sung loud and clear. And the first letter of the first word in this sentence, Carl's, is C. And C is also the first letter of Christmas. So you just write it like this for every sentence, and then you have Christmas for the first letter of each sentence together. So moving on, I will be explaining a concrete poem. A concrete poem is a free verse poem. So this means you don't have any specific rules you have to follow, and you can rhyme if you want to or not. But you have one rule you need to follow if you want to write a concrete poem. You need to write it in the shape of the object, which is what the poem is about. So for instance, here's an example. It is a concrete poem, and it is about candy canes. So I'm going to read it to you. Candy canes, oh so sweet. I love to unwrap a tasty treat. So many kinds, so fun to eat. Peppermint or cherry swirls. Blueberry with tiny whirls. Okay, so if you ever eaten a candy cane, you know it's the shape of the poem. So it's the shape of what the poem is like. So this is how a concrete poem works. Moving on, I'll be explaining what rhyming words and syllables are. So you may have heard me say rhyme or rhyming in the past few slides, and you might not completely understand what it means. So I'm going to just explain it to you. So rhyme means a repetition of similar sounds, and it is usually at the end of the word. And rhyming is mostly used in poems and songs to make it sound better. Okay, so some rhyming words here. Does anyone want to read them? You can raise your hand. Okay, let's see. So how about Matthew? Do you want to read it?
Mat, hat, cat, bat, rat, fat, pat.
Okay, very good job. So these words all end with the repetition of a same sound, which is at. So that's why they sound good together, and they rhyme. So let's practice more. So does anyone want to tell me what rhymes with tree? There are multiple answers. Okay, so if you want to say what rhymes with tree, you can unmute yourself. Tree? Okay, so can you repeat that again? Tree? Yes, tree rhymes with tree. That is right. Can you think of any other things that rhyme with tree? Okay. Okay, Grace, you can unmute yourself and
3.
3. Okay, good job. And can you think of anything else? So you can just unmute yourself since I can't really see your names. You can just unmute yourself and say it out loud.
3. B.
Good job. Those are all really good answers. Now moving on. So what rhymes with cake?
Bake.
Bake. That's a good one. Anything else?
Cake.
Good job. And can you think of any more?
Bake.
Those are all very good ones.
Lake.
Yeah, lake is also a very good one. So let's try one more. What rhymes with bed?
Head.
Yeah, head. Okay. Are there any more?
Red.
Good job.
Head.
Yeah, those are all very good ones. So moving on, I'll be talking about what syllables are. So syllables. So syllable is a part of a word and it is sometimes called a beat and it has a vowel in it. So let's practice some, okay? So for example, Christmas. So how many syllables does Christmas have?
2.
Good job. Does anyone have another answer or do you all agree with Matthew? Okay, you agree. Okay then. The answer is 2. It has 2 syllables. So we can clap it out. Christmas. It has 2 syllables. So very good. Now let's move on. So let's practice some words. So you can just say the syllables out loud. So how many syllables does snowman have?
2. Snowman.
Good job. So you can clap it out. Snowman. It has 2 syllables. Now how about winter?
1.
1. Okay, 2.
2.
So the answer is 2. We can clap it out together. So winter. It has 2 syllables. So does anyone want to try ice?
1.
Good job. So ice has 1 syllable. Ice. So it has 1 syllable. Very good. Now what about candy? How many syllables does it have?
2.
2. Okay, good job. So it has 2. Now how about gift?
2. 1.
Yeah.
1.
So the answer is 1. Gift. So it has 1. How about the word snow?
1.
Good job. You guys are also fast. Okay. Now let's move on. So Now I'm going to explain some famous poets. So there are many famous poets, and I can't explain all of them today. So today we will just be focusing on two famous poets, Emily Dickinson and Shel Silverstein. So first, let's learn about Emily Dickinson. So Emily Dickinson was born on December 10th, 1830, and died on May 15th, 1886. And she wrote poetry of great power. And she also wrote a lot about nature. And most of her poems are free writes. And if you read one of her poems, it is very detailed and descriptive. And her poems are pretty famous. So if you read one of her poems, it would be a great chance for you to learn how she writes them and learn from her poems to write your own. And moving on, we will be learning about Shel Silverstein. And he was a very unique writer, and he wrote many poems for children. And he also wrote Where the Sidewalk Ends, which is pretty famous, and many other poems for children. And his poems are all pretty funny. And if you like funny things, you can read them. And besides being a poet, he is also a cartoonist and actor. I see one of you are raising your hands. If that is you, you may unmute yourself.
He also wrote The Giving Tree.
Yeah, that is correct. He also wrote a very famous book called The Giving Tree, about a tree and a boy. So now I will be explaining how to write a poem. Now, I recommend before writing a poem, you should brainstorm ideas, because then you would know what to write. And you can also write a poem following the rules for each type of poem that I explained earlier. So what makes a good poem? You can add lots of adjectives and vivid verbs to make your poem more descriptive and able to visualize. And you can also add figurative language, and I will be explaining what figurative language is. So figurative language includes many things. And these are some of the things figurative language includes. Figurative language includes similes and metaphors, hyperboles, personification, onomatopoeias, idioms, alliteration, and imagery. So I'll be explaining all of them. So first I will be explaining what similes and metaphors are. So a simile compares two unlike things, and it uses like and as blank as a something. So an example is the pillow is as light as a feather. So this uses as blank as a because it has as light as a feather. So, and a metaphor is a word compared to an object/action, but isn't literally true. For instance, she cried a river. She wouldn't actually cry a river of tears, but this just shows you that she cried a lot instead of plainly saying she cried a lot. So this is why figurative language is really good in poems and writing pieces also. And next I'll be explaining hyperboles and personifications. And hyperbole is an exaggerated statement not meant to be taken literally. For instance, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. So somebody couldn't actually eat a horse, but this just shows the reader that this person is really hungry. And a personification is when you apply human-like attributes to a non-alive thing. For instance, lightning danced across the sky. Lightning can't actually dance like us, but this just shows the movement of the lightning when it's moving across the sky. So now I'll be explaining what onomatopoeias and idioms are. Onomatopoeias are words as an imitation of a sound. For instance, boom and crash and bang. But onomatopoeias don't have to be loud sounds. They can also be soft sounds, like sh or creak, something like that. So onomatopoeias are words as an imitation of a sound. And idioms are common expressions used in a society, but isn't taken literally. For instance, you may have heard of "It's raining cats and dogs." And you might wonder, why is it raining cats and dogs? But this just means it's raining really hard outside, and it's raining a lot. So last, I'll be explaining what alliteration and imagery is. Alliteration is multiple words with the same starting sound. It's basically like a tongue twister. For example, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. This is kind of like a tongue twister, and it's also called alliteration. And imagery is descriptive language that appeals to the senses. And it uses lots of our senses, such as see, hear, taste, smell, and touch. And applies them to a sentence and helps us visualize it more. For example, orange and pink clouds dotted the sky as the setting sun cast its light across the skyline. So this is really detailed, and you can imagine the picture of this. You may imagine this. So this might be the picture you imagine when you hear this. Orange and pink clouds dotted the sky as the setting sun casts its light across the skyline. So other things you can apply to your poem are rhyming words and syllable count and free write. So now I will be giving you some examples of poems that I wrote. So the first one is a free write. Does anyone want to read it? So Grace, you can unmute yourself and read it.
You give me something, I give you something. Similes stretch across our face. Giving and sharing gifts is the best thing to do.
Okay, thank you for reading it. And by the way, it's smiles and not similes, so it's fine. So this poem that I wrote, it's a free write. So a free write is basically a type of poem, and you don't need to follow any rules. You're free to write whatever you want to. And so basically you could add rhyming words or syllable counts, but you don't have to. Okay, so in this poem, I wrote some imagery. So basically, smiles stretch across our face. You can imagine two people giving and sharing gifts and smiles on their faces. So I have a question to ask you guys. Do you like to share gifts, or do you like to keep them all for yourself?
Share.
Okay, good.
I like to keep.
Okay, you like to keep. So then you will have more gifts. I also like to keep. Okay, so does anyone else want to say if they like to give gifts or keep gifts? Okay, good. Okay, then we will move on to the next poem example that I wrote. So this one is a rhyming poem. Would anyone like to read it for us? Okay, Grace.
Christmas is here. Snow is everywhere. Lights are hanging on a tree. Presents are under the tree. Everyone is happy. The children are getting sleepy.
Okay, very good. Thank you for reading it for us. And now, can anyone tell me some words you find that are rhyming?
Yeah.
So does Did anyone find words that rhymed?
Here and everywhere.
Good.
Happy and sleepy.
Yeah. And
Tree and tree.
okay, tree and tree. I couldn't really think of anything else to use, so I just used the tree again. Here and everywhere. Yes, that is right. And happy and sleepy is also right. So then in this poem, I use some rhyming words, and it sometimes sounds better and more. It sounds like it fits. And also, when you are writing a rhyming poem, it's sometimes more challenging than writing a free write poem, because when you are writing a rhyming poem, you need to know which words rhyme and which don't. And that makes it more challenging. But with practice, you can write any type of poem, and they will all be easy and not that difficult. This is another poem I wrote. Will anyone like to read it? Okay, so David, you can unmute yourself and read it.
The bells ring and jingle. Everybody is here. Take off coats and jackets. Sit down in a nice chair. Come close to the fire and look up at the trees. Open the presents, you with your family.
Okay, good. Thank you for reading it. You read really well. Thank you. And so can anyone tell me how many syllables I used in each sentence?
6.
Okay, good job. It is 6. So when writing a syllable poem, each line can be the same amount of syllables, or you can use a pattern. Either way is fine. And also, does anybody notice anything else I used in my poem besides syllables?
Rhyming.
Okay, good job. Yes, I added some rhyming in here because when writing a syllable poem or a rhyming poem, you can also add
Here and chair.
Yes, that's right. Chair and here, yes. And you can also add rhyming words when you are writing a syllable poem. And you can also add syllables when you are writing a rhyming poem. So you can switch it around a little. And in this poem, you can also visualize something. You can visualize a family gathering around a Christmas tree and sitting in chairs, and there's the fire and a lot of presents. So here's a picture. Okay, so this is the end, and I hope you enjoyed and learned something new. Thank you for listening, and I encourage you to write your own poem. And if your poem doesn't turn out too great, you can write it again, or if you want to improve on your poem skills, you can read it to your mom and dad or family members, and then you can ask them if they can visualize something based on your poem. So, do you have any questions?